The following is presented as an entertainment program emphasizing folklore. It is not intended as legal advice or medical advice in any way, and should not be used to replace the advice of a legal or medical professional. Hello and welcome to the New World Witchery Folk Magician's Notebook video edition for the first quarter of 2026. These will be quarterly episodes that offer a brief overview of folk magical topics and information that might be useful to you in your magical practice or studies. We highly recommend that you also pick up a reliable almanac for folk magic, such as the Witch's Almanac, Llewellyn's Witch's Daybook, the Ritual Daily Planner, or your local Farmer's Almanac. Now, let's make some magic. Let's take a look at the moon for January through March of 2026. We begin January with the moon waxing in Gemini, a good time to make plans, set goals, hello New Year's resolutions, and socialize, hello Coven brunch. Our first full moon of 2026 is on January 3rd, and it will be a supermoon, meaning that the moon will appear significantly larger due to its proximity to the horizon. The full moon will be in Cancer on the 3rd, which means it will be full of a lot of homebody energy. But it's also an ideal time to set any home protection work that you intend to last through the year, such as nailing down your house. January 6th is the Feast of the Epiphany, a part of the 12 days of Christmas, and traditionally the day of the visiting Magi, and a day for making king cakes, but also a day to celebrate La Befana, the Italian Christmas witch whose name derives from the word for Epiphany. This also kicks off the traditional carnival season. The 10th of January will see Jupiter at its brightest all year, as it is in opposition to the Sun just above the Gemini constellation, which also bodes well for contract-based magic or legal magic in general. On January 18th, the moon finishes waxing in the sign of Capricorn, then transitions into Aquarius just after the official new moon on the 18th. This is an excellent period for magical rest and rejuvenation, as well as a period for doing magical studies and research. It can also be an effective time to work banishing or releasing magic. We'll close out January with the moon waxing in Cancer on the 29th through the 31st, and you might consider doing some work to make your home more inviting, magically speaking, such as burning amicable incenses or candles. You can also use this as a great time to recharge yourself with a magical bath, too. As we kick off February, the moon continues waxing and transitions into Leo on the 1st. The 1st is also Candlemas, or Imbolc, a day for lighting and blessing candles, kindling midwinter fires, and honoring figures such as St. Bridget or St. Blaise. This year, with the full moon falling on the same day, it's a great time to seek illumination and or provide it for others by gathering people to light communal fires, or do communal candle making or candle blessing rituals. On the 14th, it is, of course, Valentine's Day, and the moon is void of course. If you are so inclined, this is often a day for love spells and sex magic, and chocolate. Strangely, it's also a popular day for hexes and curses. February 17th is packed full. It's the new moon in Aquarius and the Lunar New Year. This is when a period of renewed innovation and invigoration begins, with a lot of mental energy spawning exciting new ideas. Don't forget to temper your creativity by making sure you have a plan for long-term magical maintenance, too. There's a solar eclipse as well, although it will mostly only be visible in places like Antarctica. This will also mark the beginning of the Year of the Horse in the Chinese zodiac, making it a good time to hang a horseshoe over your door. This year, the 17th is also Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras, and a day to get all kinds of sweet treats, fastnachts, pancakes, etc., into your system before the Lenten fast. Saturday, February 28th, will see a planetary alignment. Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune will all be potentially visible in an arc across the sky, forming a parade of planets that could be very powerful for those who do planetary magic. The weeks leading up to this date and following will also see the planets largely aligned, so if you're doing work needing the help of several celestial orbs, this is a good period for that. February ends and March begins with the waxing moon in Leo, meaning a lot of magical energy behind the spells involving glamour, creative expression, and workings that will bolster one's esteem and ego. Do ridiculous things boldly, and they will be more likely to pay off in this period. On March 3rd, we have a full moon in Virgo. This is a full moon all about stimulating your curiosity and a desire to learn and grow. With spring just around the corner, it's a great time to get seedlings going, take a wild crafting walk, plan your coming garden with witchy plants like angelica, gravel root, or witch hazel, and try some new forms of magic and divination. There will also be a lunar eclipse visible in western North America and parts of Asia and Oceania, making it a good time for banishing work. Our next big event is the new moon in Pisces on March 18th. The new moon in Pisces is a time for deep intuitive work, including working with dreams, divination, and intuition. It's also a great time to do work with seaside sorcery if you have that opportunity, or even to just take a magical bath as well. Following closely on the heels of the new moon is the spring equinox, which happens on March 20th when the moon is void of course. This is a good time for renewal and rebirth. While the moon will be void of course during the actual equinox, it will be transitioning from Aries to Taurus, and that makes it a good time for doing magical work with grounding or cleansing. It's also a great time to take stock of local plants in your bioregion that you could build magical relationships with. We'll end March with the moon just tipping into Libra on the 31st, waiting to wax to a full moon on April Fool's Day, so be prepared for some shenanigans. Happy first stave of the new year, everyone. This month, I'm looking at the Mystical Medleys Tarot deck, designed by Gary Hole. This deck is a standard Rider-Waite Smith deck done in a cartoonish rubber hose classic animation style. The images have exaggerated expressions, large eyes, and boneless limbs that seem to flex and move like rubber hoses, which is where this style gets its name. If you've ever seen very old Disney or Warner Brothers animations, you've probably seen this type of art. The deck itself is a fun and engaging way to have a playful interaction with tarot, and it comes with a typical little white book guide to card meanings, although it's actually a hardcover with a nice design that goes with the sturdy, magnetically closed box, which is a nice treat. The cards all have bright, colorful designs, and the cartoonishness of the imagery can make some of the often nastier cards like the Ten of Swords or the Tower card feel a bit less dire. There are also two bonus cards, the Happy Squirrel and the Sad Squirrel, a riff on a gag from an old Simpsons episode where the Happy Squirrel was a dire warning to Lisa about a troubled romance in her future. I'm very fond of this deck, and often use it as a basic go-to deck when I have casual questions that I want answers to, or when I want to read for someone who is perhaps a little hesitant about tarot readings, since the silly styling can help people drop their guard and relax a bit. It's also a fun one to bring out among tarot enthusiasts because they want to see their favorite cards interpreted in the style of Steamboat Willie or Clarabelle the Cow. For the spread this month, I'm keeping it simple with a basic 3-card reading. In general, this kind of reading is one I like to link to time, usually a past, present, future sort of approach. 3-card readings are wonderful because they are quick, but provide some context for the reader that a simple 1-card pull often can't. If you are reading at a party or in a larger group environment, a 3-card reading is a great way to be able to do multiple readings fairly efficiently and still leave people feeling satisfied that they got some good information. In this case, I've pulled a basic 3-card reading that shows the 9 of Wands in the past, the 3 of Swords in the present, and the Ace of Swords in the future. This is definitely the kind of reading that would have me telling someone to remember it's always darkest before the dawn. The Nine of Wands shows perseverance, but also a sense of being beleaguered and exhausted, while the Three of Swords is a card of heartbreak, suffering, and loss. However, both of those get transformed by the Ace of Swords into a potential message of resilience, saying that the battles of yesterday and today are setting up a clear-headed, energized approach to tomorrow that will empower the person I'm reading for and let them turn losses and mistakes into opportunities and growth. Our book this month is Cunning by Tabitha Stanmore. For those who have been longtime listeners to our podcast, you know that we had the author of this book on our show last year. And for those of you supporting us on Patreon, you also got to participate in a book club discussion back in March. Dr. Stanmore is a historian of the early modern period, a time frame that roughly covers the 16th through 18th centuries with some significant flexibility around that timeline. And she's done extensive research on the roles of service magicians in English communities. She's currently part of a research project looking at 1640 witchcraft trials that impacted 7 counties in eastern England. She's written several scholarly monographs, but Cunning was her first public history book, and it's a broad overview of numerous types of service magicians throughout early modern English and broader UK history. She's very deftly divided the book into an introduction and then chapters on specific services offered by Cunning such as how to find thieves and lost goods, how to win at trial, how to get revenge, and how to gain a kingdom. While some of the functions of particular service magicians overlap, many operated with only 1 or 2 spheres of influence. For example, Stanmore begins by sharing the story of Mabel Grey, who in 1637 lost some silver spoons and went to a cunning woman in Southwark, who it turns out did not specialize in lost object magic, but who gave her a referral to a cunning man in Drury Lane who did. These sorts of narratives pepper Stanmore's research, and accounts of cunning women who took on diseases and their suffering clients to help alleviate their illnesses, duels that had to be stopped short because of protective charms discovered in the armors of one of the combatants, and troops of treasure hunters digging up roadside landmarks in search of quick riches, all make the world of Cunning come alive for the reader. Stanmore draws heavily upon court documents for this work, rooting each narrative in history and exploring what the social and legal ramifications of magic would have been for a particular person or in a particular moment. The magical methods here are sometimes a secondary focus, with magical techniques woven into the threads of story and historical documentation, which might be frustrating to some magically oriented readers, but there's still much to glean from these pages about the tools, spells, and approaches used by English cunning over several centuries. I suggest keeping a book like Jim Baker's Cunning Man's Handbook, or the Book of English Magic by Philip Cargom and Richard Haygate handy to cross-reference some of the spells if you'd like to use this as a platform for a deeper dive into those methods. But even on its own, Cunning is a very informative and engaging book that offers readers a lot to discover about the many forms of magic and magical practitioner that have existed over time in the microcosm of English folk magic. If you are a fan of historical magic writing, like the work of Emma Wilby, Ronald Hutton, who was Stanmore's research supervisor at one point, and Owen Davies, I believe that you will find much to love in Cunning Once when the world was young. There lived 2 sisters. The eldest was known as Helena, and she was haughty, selfish, and proud. The youngest was called Marushka, and she was kind, generous, and thoughtful. They lived with their mother in a little village near a forest, and which was also near a mountain, and which some said was not so very far from the end of the world. Their mother greatly favored Helena because she was the older daughter, and because she reminded the mother so much of herself, but both mother and sister were jealous of and cruel towards Marushka, who was greatly liked and favored. They made Marushka do all the chores, cleaning the house, milking the cow, and baking the bread. But Marushka never complained, and indeed seemed quite happy, which only made Helena and her mother angrier. Soon their mother worried that Marushka would find a match before Helena, and so they plotted to get rid of the girl. One day, deep in the winter, Helena sighed deeply. Marushka asked what was the matter, and Helena said that she longed for the scent of spring violets. At first Marushka tried to reason with her that violets could not grow through the January snow. But both Helena and her mother drove Marushka from the house, saying that if she did not return with violets, they would beat her black and blue. Marushka went deep into the forest, and high up in the mountain, and the wind blew cold, and the snow came down. She feared she might freeze, when suddenly she saw a little flicker of fire through the trees. She approached and found a fire around which sat 12 stones with 12 strange people upon them. 3 were very old, with big white beards. 3 were somewhat younger looking, with small beards upon their faces. 3 were younger still, with only the mustaches of youth. And the last 3 were barefaced and barely more than children. Marushka quickly knew that she had found the 12 months, and recognized Elder January sitting upon the high seat by the fire. Timidly, she approached and begged that she might warm herself by their fire, lest she freeze to death. They welcomed her, and old January asked why she was out wandering in the mountains alone. She said she had been tasked to bring back violets by her sister and mother. January frowned, and reminded her that violets did not bloom in the winter. Marushka burst into tears and explained that if she brought back no violets, she would be beaten. Old January thought, and then turned to one of the youngest-looking months, telling him, "Brother March, come and sit upon the high seat a moment." Young March did so, and waved his staff over the fire, and flowers of all types began to bloom around them. Marushka gasped with delight, and then saw a large patch of violets, which she gathered quickly in her apron. She thanked the months and hurried back down the mountain to home. Her family was astounded to see her return at all, much less with violets, but when they asked where she had got them, she simply said that she had found a patch high up in the mountains. Soon Helena and her mother plotted again, and Helena sighed that she could be only happy with the scent of roses to comfort her. Again, Marushka tried to explain that roses did not grow in snow, but she was once more driven from the house and told she must bring back roses or be beaten black and blue. Again, Marushka wandered into the mountains, and found herself at the edge of the glade where sat the 12 months. She again begged their leave to warm herself by their fire, and they welcomed her. January asked why she had returned, and once more Marushka burst into tears and explained that she must bring roses or be beaten. January scowled but said, "Brother June, come and take the high seat." June did so, and waved his staff over the fire, and the snow melted away and a warm sun shone down upon them all. Birds sang and bees buzzed, and a beautiful rose bush sprang up. Marushka gathered as many roses as she could and thanked the months, then headed back down the mountain. Once more her family was astonished to see her return, and even more astonished when she tumbled out an apron full of roses at their feet. When pressed, she said only that she had found a rose bush growing high on the mountain. A few days more, and Mother and Helena began plotting again. This time Helena groaned that she must have fresh apples right from the tree, and, despite Marushka's protests, she was again driven out to find apples or be beaten for her failure. Again Marushka wandered into the mountains and found herself at the edge of the glade, where sat the 12 months. And again she begged their leave to warm herself by their fire, and they welcomed her. January asked once more why she had come back, and Marushka, sobbing, explained about the apples. January thought and nodded, and invited September to take the high seat. When September waved his staff over the fire, the leaves began to change to golds and reds, and the winter faded to a crisp autumn breeze, and a beautiful apple tree sprang up. January told Marushka to take only 2 apples from this tree, which she did dutifully, and thanked the 12 months as she headed down the mountain. This time her family was not so surprised to see her return, but they were surprised to find that she had but 2 apples for them, which Helena and her mother greedily devoured. The apples were so good, however, that they craved them more and accused Marushka of having eaten the rest on her way down the mountain. Marushka insisted she had only been allowed to take 2 apples, but more grew upon a beautiful tree at the top of the mountain. And so Helena and her mother rushed out the door and headed into the forest and up the mountain to find the tree. They soon found the glade of the 12 months, but without so much a please or a thank you, they ran up to the fire and began warming themselves. January crossly asked who they were and what they were doing here, but they haughtily replied that they did not need to answer to old men who lived in the mountains, for they were proper ladies. Helena and her mother knew that these men must have given Marushka the apples, and so they demanded that the months show them the apple tree as well, and threatened to beat them if they did not. January, who sat on the high seat now, grew dark with anger, and shook his staff over the fire, and the wind grew colder, and the snow fell harder, and ice began to form around the 2 women. Soon they were frozen solid there on the mountain, high in the forest, far from home. Marushka kept watch and waited for many days, but as winter turned to spring, she knew they would not be coming back. Still, she did the cleaning, and milked the cow, and baked the bread, and was as happy as she could be, and she lived out her days as such, thankful for what she had, and so her seasons were filled with gratitude and peace until the very end. The end. This month's Materia Magica is Incantation Bowls. Found throughout the ancient Middle East, incantation bowls operated as a way to bind unwanted spirits or demons when a person, or sometimes multiple people, felt that their misfortunes had supernatural origins. This highly cosmopolitan region saw trade activity across many cultures, including the Sassanid and Roman empires, the vestiges of Babylonian culture, Jewish traditions, and an emerging Arabic culture that would become the rootstock of Islamic society in the centuries to follow. From the 5th to the 7th century CE, cities like Nippur, Ctesiphon, and Uruk saw these groups cross not only in their trade, but in their cultural practices, including magic. The presence of demons was very real in the minds of these peoples. They made people sick, gave them misfortunes and death, or enticed them into making bad decisions on an almost daily basis. To combat these harmful influences, binding spells designed to restrain demonic activity and influence emerged, with the incantation bowl functioning as a trap for dangerous forces. A clay bowl was inscribed with a series of spells written in languages like Hebrew or Aramaic, which spiraled down the inner surface of the bowl, terminating in a small image of a demon etched at the bottom. Through these charms, the makers of the bowl threatened to punish the demon, or anyone else who might be acting against them just for good measure, with various torments such as casting into the sea and serving it up to the ancient and mighty sea monster Leviathan, being bound in brass and iron, restrained hand and foot in fire, or other unpleasant outcomes. While a variety of demons appear in the bowls, a few seem to be regular mainstays. These are the child-killing Lilith, the vulture-like grave-robbing Ghoul, and the fiery desert Jinn spirits, all found in multiple bowls. In some cases, an entire class of demons was bound, as is in the case when the bowls were intended to bind Liliths in the plural, or even all evil Satans, here meaning something like adversary spirits, or even just troublesome ghosts. One famed bowl was commissioned by 2 businessmen named Abuna and Iba, who lived in the town of Nippur and met with a local sorcerer named Pabak to design a bowl and restrain the spirit who'd been interfering in their recent overland trade routes. Pabak's name shows up in several bowls, which tells us that these were not just one-off creations, but a business that those engaged in service magic, that is, magic of paid professionals, would offer to their local communities. The bowl that Abuna, Iba, and Pabak made was one of hundreds of bowls found throughout Mesopotamia, now the area around the shared border of Iran and Iraq, bearing similar inscriptions in Hebrew, Aramaic, and other Middle Eastern languages. Some included the etched depiction of the demon they intended to bind, or even a small graffito of the sorcerer binding the demon through magic. Several invoke the name Yudvehave, or Yahweh, a Hebrew supreme god, or variations of that spirit such as El Shaddai, the Almighty Divine One, or El, God of Gods. Other spirits invoked for binding included divine messengers or angels like Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, Ramael, Habael, Surael, or Hanananiel, or goddesses such as Astarte, Ishtar, Inanna, or even groups of gods, such as the 60 male gods and 80 female goddesses. In addition to their role as spirit traps, the bowls could also be employed as love spells. In a few of the extant examples, we have bowls that were commissioned as a way of trapping a particular person in love with another. In one case, a wife feels neglected by her husband and uses the bowl to draw him back into love and lust with her. Interestingly, the same couple named in this bowl also seems to have had problems with conceiving children, as another bowl names them as being affected by Liliths who have been interfering with their efforts, possibly by stealing his libido. A second love spell seems to be designed to make the target fall obsessively in love with a woman, and even provides a recipe for a love potion to be used on him, and make him feel that his heart was torn into pieces unless the crush returned her affections. Once the bowls were made, they were frequently kiln fired to set them, then sealed with wax and sometimes buried near the place where the demon they were designed to bind was thought to inhabit. Creature Corner. Our creature of the month is the Tomte or Nisse. Tomte and Nisse are terms that refer to usually helpful household spirits or farm spirits found in Scandinavian lore. Tomte are specifically Swedish, while the Nisse are found in several places in Scandinavia, including Norway and Denmark. They are sometimes depicted similarly to the way that gnomes get depicted, with bushy beards and colorful clothes mounted on creatures of diminutive stature. But this is only an approximation, since ideally you would never see one. If they do suspect they are being seen, spied on, or otherwise observed, they may decide to leave your home or farmstead forever. So trying to catch a glimpse of one is unwise, especially since they can sometimes cause problems on their way out. Generally, they are solitary spirits, although sometimes a small group of them might occupy a farm. In most cases, they prefer to live in barns and outbuildings, but they will sometimes also enter into the primary home and stay close to the hearth. If they perceive you as a kind person, kind to animals and other people, and generous with your bounty, they will often assist you, and you may wake up to find your chores done or your animals cared for. They don't require any real payment other than an annual offering of food. On this point, they are quite specific, however, as you are to give them a bowl of porridge with a pat of butter on top on Christmas Eve. Do not put the butter on the bottom, or else they will think that you are insulting them and cause damage and chaos to your home and farm. Some traditions also offer them salted fish too, although porridge seems to be the universal requirement. These figures may also play a role in the development of the lore of other creatures from folklore, such as the Yule lads of Iceland, who seem like mischievous Tomten or Nissen, gone a little bit awry under the influence of Grilla, the winter ogress or witch. They may also be a key influence on more modern iterations of Santa Claus, as the term Nisse seems linguistically connected to Nicholas, and they very much match the description of the jolly old elf in Clement Clarke Moore's famous A Visit from St. Nicholas, or 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, poem. For more information on these creatures, I would recommend looking at Linda Radish's The Old Magic of Christmas, or Claude Lequiteux's work on household spirits or Norse and German folklore. That's it for this entry into your New World Witchery Folk Magicians video notebook. Thank you so much for joining us this quarter, and we hope that you will see you back again for quarter 2 of 2026. If you'd like to help support this show and our work, you can visit us at patreon.com/newworldwitchery, where $1 a month or whatever you can afford will help to produce shows like this, produce additional content as well, and get you some fun perks along the way also. So if you have questions, thoughts, things that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to send us an email at compassandkey@gmail.com, or you can email us at newworldwitcherypodcast@gmail.com as well. Both of those will reach us. And please be sure to stop by our website, newworldwitchery.com, where you can find over 250 episodes of our audio podcast, as well as old Folk Magicians Notebooks audio entries. We have a monthly Folk Magicians Notebook audio podcast as well. And we have over 250 articles on various types of North American folk magic there too. So please feel free to go check that out also. Until next time, thanks so much for listening, and be well.